Hey everyone, thanks for joining us and welcome to today's webinar titled Beyond Recovery, How Modern Integration Strategies Drive Revenue and Efficiency. My name is Jason Freed, editor of Hotel Recovery, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. Beyond Recovery is an ongoing series of content and webinar discussions that SHR and Hotel Recovery are working on together, really aimed at helping hotels sort of capture the most demand as travelers start getting back on the road and really position themselves to get ahead in the recovery. So before we start the conversation, a couple quick things. The audio is on mute for all attendees, but please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. There is a Q&A button, I believe, at the bottom of your screen that you can use to ask questions. And I'm going to sprinkle those questions in throughout the conversation just to make it more of a dynamic, lively conversation. So anytime you've got a question, you can either raise your hand or just throw it in that Q&A and I'll be monitoring and getting to those questions. So also the session is being recorded, and tomorrow we'll send an email to all the registrants with a link to the video and to any topic slides that we present. So with that being said, this is more of a discussion than a presentation. We like to do these very casual, have a casual conversation with our panelists. And I'll be moderating that, so I'll be sort of keeping the flow of the conversation. And how we're going to start is we're going to get to know our panelists, and I'll be asking questions of each of them, really trying to get some takeaways that you, our hotelier audience, can implement at your properties to help make a difference in your recovery efforts and set your hotels up for success in the long run. So the topic we're discussing today is integrations. And as we all know, this topic of sort of improving integrations and building a better, more modern hotel tech stack isn't really new. It's something we've been discussing for probably the past couple decades. But what has changed in recent years is the way these new modern cloud-based providers are really looking at the responsibility around integrations, right? So taking the onus off of hoteliers and really taking on the responsibility of making sure your systems are working best for you. And, you know, over the past couple days, I got really excited about this conversation. I'm really excited that these three solution providers that are with us today, SHR, iVvy, and Jonas Quorum, are really, you know, they came to me with a unified focus on sort of telling that message, that they really are shifting their focus and changing their culture around integrations. And they wanted to share that message with the hospitality community, and I'm happy to help them do that. So we're going to get started. We're going to start the conversation around that, and then we'll get into some specifics around why it matters to you, to our hotelier audience, to the hoteliers on the call, what deeply integrated systems allow you to accomplish. I'll start with the introductions. I'm going left to right on my screen, which may not be left to right on your screen, but I'm going to start with Amy Forss. Amy is SVP of Sales at iVvy. iVvy is a modern cloud-based sales and catering platform. Next up, we've got Jake Lewis. Jake is VP of Product at Jonas Quorum, a property management system. And last but not least, we have Estella Hale, who is Chief Product Evangelist at SHR. SHR provides three products that they refer to as a revenue generation engine. So with that, what I'd like to do is ask each of you to talk a little bit about yourselves, your role, and a little bit about your company. Amy, can we start with you?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. So as you mentioned, Jason, I'm the Senior Vice President of North America for iVvy. We are a global company. Our headquarters is actually in the Gold Coast in Australia. So we brought this solution to the US after about 13 years in business, about 3 years ago. And we are really the new evolution of sales and catering software. So being more efficient and effective for our sales and catering teams so that they can manage the process, everything from the lead coming in all the way through to the very end and the customer walking out the door and everything in between. Even generating those leads, helping to generate the leads for the customer as well through a piece of our platform in marketing as
Awesome.
well. So we kind of handle everything for that particular team.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate that. Jake, why don't we move over to you next? Can you tell us a little bit about your role and about Jonas Quorum?
Yeah, thanks. Jake Lewis. I'm the VP of Product at Quorum. I've been doing this for 20 years this month, actually. So I've been around for a while. Yeah, I started in support, actually. I was an agent when I was in college, and then moved into development and into some leadership roles. So I've kind of done it all. But we at Quorum, we are actually owned by Jonas Software. I don't know if you know much about them, but we're under the umbrella of Jonas Hospitality. So there's Quorum, we've got Springer Miller, we've got SpaSoft, Bookasys, Leonardo, Achiga. All of us sit under that umbrella. Our core is property management systems. We've had a cloud solution since I think 2009. So we were probably one of the first that actually had a true cloud solution out there. So we feel strongly that we've worked out all the kinks, all of that, and our solution is one of the best out there. And as we talked today, our platform, Jonas Arc, is what we call it, and our integrations to SHR and to iVvy and many others is really top of the line.
Great. Thanks, Jake. We'll end with you, Estella.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I've been talking to Jake since 2009. I think so.
I think it might have been longer. I think way back, probably almost 20 years.
Yeah. So Jake outed me. I have also been doing this for 20 years. At SHR, we are moving distribution to revenue generation. We have been doing CRS, Central Reservation System, for many years, and that is the main product that we launched, Windsor for CRS, in 2009. Then a couple of years ago, we wanted to make a bet of where distribution was going to go in the future. And one of the driving philosophies for us for distribution is that distribution is not about connecting hotels to channels. It's about connecting hotels to their guests. The channel is just the means to the end, not the end. So with that, we started to study what does a CRS or what does distribution need to bring in addition to just connections. So we started in a path of bringing some of the integrations that we had that were showing us a more successful distribution with our clients included revenue management system and revenue management practice, and the recognition of a guest through CRM. So we incorporated those into our product portfolio, and we incorporated them as how they act and interact together to, again, we continue to be on the business of distribution. We just believe that distribution now includes more components than just that connectivity from the CRS. And I lead the product team for those products.
Awesome. Thank you, Estella. Let me follow up that question to each of you with sort of a state of the industry or a state of the company. How do things look different today than they did in 2019? I know that's a loaded question, but how do your roles look different? How's everything going at your company? And then, as you talk to your clients and your customers along this idea of recovery, how are things going? What's sort of the state of the market, if you will? And let's just go down the line, and I'll start with you, Amy, on that.
Yeah. So obviously, as the obvious statement is that the group sector has been impacted the most, right, in the hospitality industry. The good news is for the position that we sit in is there's really always kind of been one solution out there to solve the purpose of the sales and catering platform, and so it's been a very monopolized market, and so we're seeing customers really kind of think about different partnerships and such, and how they can do things better in this particular space where there's really just kind of been one solution that they've worked with. So that's really shaking things up by us coming in and being the opportunity to be, another option for our customers and our customer base. And I specifically, I come from this side of the industry. So, all of us have just kind of accepted what has been. And now I think we're really starting to think about what we actually need and who's that partner that will actually work with us to develop what our needs are in that particular space. So, gone are the days of just accepting it. I think, for hotels, you shouldn't. You definitely should push on your partners, and the whole reason for the last year and everything that happened in the last year has given people that momentum to make some of those changes in space. So for us, that's great because we are that more modern, efficient, effective solution. And I think people are accepting the fact that they might need to make a change at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Amy. Jake, how about from you, from a property management perspective, how have things sort of evolved over the past 18 months for Quorum? What are your customers asking for differently than they were asking for maybe in 2019? And how have are you positioning the solutions to solve those challenges?
Yeah, it's been a crazy 18 months, right? We, I think not just in the PMS world, but in hospitality technology in general. I think it's kind of required all of us, and ourselves included, to become more innovative. And when I say innovative, I don't mean that we're just leading edge new stuff. It's how can we be better for our customers, right? How can we do things faster, better quality, and ultimately so that their guests can feel safe coming in the door, their employees can feel safe going to work. The contactless guest experience is one of the things that comes to my mind of how to, that existed prior to COVID, but not everybody had it. But it's becoming more of a demand. And so how do we make sure that we can do that? And that is something that we've been working on, and we're doing it, I think, better and faster so that the guests can get in the door, right? A lot of hotels are trying to figure out how to keep doors open, right? So how do we capture every guest and get every guest possible through that door? And I think, figuring out how to do things better than we've done in the past, and that's what I mean by innovation. I think last year forced us to do that. We're continuing to grow in that area this year.
Yeah, very helpful.
I agree with Jake. I think that digital transformation had existed before, but we were all, after the shock, we were all pushed to question that, right? From a, like Jake mentions, from that contactless experience, but even throughout the whole path, from a distribution perspective, publishing, what are the new measures that you are taking to keep guests safe? How are you publishing them? How are you communicating them throughout? And a lot of these communications maybe existed, but they were not given the level of importance that they were during this period. So I completely agree with Jake. It was an innovation in bringing hotels to that digital transformation that maybe was available, but not absolutely required until now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Just to add
agree.
to the digital transformation too, it's also, I think it's forced people to kind of look at like who their actual partners are and how did they support them through the process of this whole, downturn in the industry, and, how are they working with them and supporting them? It was a horrible time, especially for our sector, but in general for hotels. And it's just about being a good partner and understanding the situation they're in and working together. And I think through that evaluation, people saw that there was opportunity to look elsewhere, in that, they didn't feel that partnership through that process.
And then even for us, don't you think, Amy? Because like from our perspective, that then took place on when we're prioritizing, who are our partners that are willing to work with us and have the same philosophy that us, that we're the ones that we're going to push this further. We're not going to wait for the hotels for our clients to push us. So I think from our perspective, that also made a difference.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Estella, and it brings us to the exact topic that we're discussing today. And what I wanted to dive into is this sort of philosophy on integrations and how it's evolving. Jake, you're the product person, so maybe I'll ask you first. How has Quorum's philosophy on integrations evolved over the past few years?
Yeah, like I said, I've been here for 20 years, and so I've seen an evolution in that philosophy. It's just over the past couple of years, even more so. But as you think back in the past, really, integrations were always considered to be these long, difficult endeavors, and there wasn't an expectation that we were going to get it quickly, and that. I'll say from a PMS, I think the PMS was expected to just do everything, right? And these other things were nice to have, but we needed to figure out how to make the PMS do all that stuff. And now in today's world, it's not the same, right? companies are more open to sharing data. We didn't in the past want to share data. We protected that, but we can't continue to do that. So we've had to figure out ways to allow the iVvys of the world, the SHRs and the quorums and every other partner to be able to access data. And ultimately, again, I'm going to probably hear me say a lot about the guest, right? That guest is the main, but make that guest experience positive, right? That's how our customers grow their revenue. So we need to make sure they can satisfy their guests.
Yeah, Estella, you mentioned something really interesting about not, the innovation coming from within SHR rather than waiting for the hotelier to push you on that innovation or asking for certain features and functionality. Is that something that makes a successful company? Is and sort of how is that changing? Are we taking the initiative more than we were in the past?
I think there are companies and partners that are willing to do that. I think it's not throughout the industry, but I think there are companies and partners, and our panel is a good example of those of us that are willing to do that. From our perspective, we have always subscribed to depth of integration. So we did not pursue integration by the hundreds with a low minimum common denominator, but we pursued integrations that were deeper and brought significant or relevant benefit to our clients. So we approach it from, okay, what is the job of this integration? What is the job of it's going to do, and then what does it need to do that job? And that's how we go through the evaluation process. And as we're going through the evaluation process, the result of what that integration is supposed to do does help us evaluate how to prioritize some of these integrations that can bring more to our clients without them pushing for it. And we believe that to the point where our own products are communicating more within each other than what the standards of the industry are for a CRM, CRS, and RMS to communicate, because that's a way of proving that we believe having the accessibility of this data will help hotels implement those strategies. And when we find like-minded partners, then we begin to explore that and we begin to make progress on that. And Jonas is a great example of someone that we're working with different sets of objectives for CRS and CRM, but the fact that we approach it as a very strong integration across our products, we know the information that we will need, we share it with each other, and then we bring it to the relevant system so that the hotel can recognize and bring that relevant information to the guest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Amy, I'm curious, does iVvy have a similar strategy? What's iVvy's philosophy around integrating with different partners?
So twofold. Yes, I do believe that we should be seen as thought leaders in this space and kind of provide some value to our customers that way and getting them to think outside the box. But on the other flip side as well, we really look to our customers to provide us what it is that they're trying to achieve. So, in a lot of our conversations, we'll discover that we see this a lot in this space, that they are using multiple different systems in one department. And so there's a lot of chair pivoting. And that's where we want to stop as thought leaders in this space and say, hold on a second. Why would you be spending this much time, pivoting between system and system? Well, why? Because potentially their technology wasn't built to be able to navigate into these other systems. And so that's where we can change everything, right? And that's where we're wanting to change everything and working with partners like we have on the call today and saying, we want to open your data. We don't want to handcuff you into, having your data here and not allowing you to bring that data into another system that will allow for better efficiencies for you. And so we make those suggestions. Hey, you mentioned this system. What if we were able to, push this data in there, which would then create you not having to manually do this in here and then manually go do this in another system. I mean, they're literally doing the same steps in multiple different systems, and it's just chair pivoting. And that is a total time suck that just can't be in our industry anymore. We've got people, working in multiple different positions and less people, less staff as of right now. And so we've got to push on them and say, why are you doing that? Let us help you build a more efficient process, which is done through integrations. It's not that we're going to go, build that other system. We're saying, let's partner up with this other technology and let's make sure that we're effectively sharing information back and forth so that you're not just manually doing this multiple different places.
Yeah, I think you talk about the customers, and we really are a customer driven. Like, most of the things that we do are driven by customers. I don't know who has the luxury of not doing things that their customers need, but I wish we could just build whatever we wanted. But we really want to do what our customers need. And one of the things that we often say is, what is the next best thing that we can build? Right. So there's 100 different things that we can do. And so we're always looking to make sure that we're working with our customers to understand what they need from whether it's iVvy or SHR or whatever, that to serve their guests and make their operations easier.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I think at the core of this are a few terms that I'm going to throw out that might sound like buzzwords, but I don't think they really are. And I'm looking to you guys to help me sort of explain what they mean to you. And that's the idea of open APIs. We hear that term a lot, open API or API first, companies that are thinking API first. And then sort of a twofold question. The second part of that is moving to the cloud, right? And we often hear that the cloud sort of accelerates the integrations process. So I know we're getting a little technical here, and maybe Jake, I'll start with you because of that. But what does that open API concept and that sort of native cloud environment mean to you and to Quorum? Yeah,
so to not dig into the technical, right? I don't want to. It's this term. You're right. It means it's very different to whoever you're talking to. But really, for me, and what it means to us as a company and to our customers, is we can do things faster, right? We can integrate with these other things. We don't have to solve every problem in the PMS. You may have a great partner, and we just need to talk to them, and we can do all those things for you. It allows us to do it faster. I think when you talked about accelerating the integration process, right? We can do this quick, right? We've had integrations take 2 days, right? Where people are talking to our API and depending on what they need. And when I talked earlier about doing the next best thing, doesn't mean we have to do everything. Maybe there's only one thing that you need, and that's going to allow you to solve the problem. So let's do that. So it really is about, getting our customers what they need and offering that and allowing them to do it in a way that's efficient and affordable.
Jake, I was just going to add to that really quick. Spot on. It also allows, within Open API, it allows for each individual customer to integrate the system into whatever systems they need. So it's not just a bucket of this is what we have and everyone looks the same. I think every organization is different in how they're using each of these individual technologies. And so with an Open API, they can essentially connect the system to any system that would be efficient for them. And that can look different for each organization.
Estella, anything to add on what Open APIs and API first mean to SHR?
No, I completely agree. By giving access to our open APIs, we're allowing our clients to innovate quickly. We're allowing them to adapt to the need of the guest. Updates are faster, they're more seamless, it accelerates integrations, and also it allows them to even just take a small portion and make a difference, even if they're just going to enable more fluid information, let's say on their own website that has information about real-time availability or real-time information right there. It is, again, helping to connect them with their guests, bringing that relevant information, but tailored to their use. So enabling that is very important to us.
Yeah, that's a great transition, Estella, to start to talk about what the benefits to the hoteliers are. So I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit towards sort of the operational side of the business, right? So far we've been talking a lot about the tech specs and, connecting and integrating technology, sharing data and sort of the tech angle of it. Let's talk about the operations of it a little bit. So what I'd like to do is go down the line and ask each of you what data is critical for your systems to share with other systems and what that allows the hoteliers to do. And maybe Estella, I'll stick with you to start that off. So, when SHR's 3 systems are tightly integrated with the PMS and, with the sales and catering platform, what does that allow hoteliers to achieve?
It is the understanding of the guest and understanding of each path, each of the paths that the guest is taking. Understanding it from the very beginning in the planning session, when the guest is just interacting first, let's say on their website or through their call center application, knowing the right profile of the guest, that communication with PMS, knowing the total spend of that guest, the profile from a CRM perspective, PMS perspective, all of that is important. Knowing how to present the correct offering through other systems that it connects to. So it is enabling the hospitality aspect, if you will, in that initial phase of interaction when we're enabling the transaction and then seamlessly passing it on when they become on-premise, and then how do we then continue the relevant delivery of information and content after they depart. And then from an integration perspective, it is very different for each type of integration. So the relevant information that we will need for the connection to a payment gateway or an OTA or a PMS, it will vary a lot. But again, the guiding principle is, how will this hotel serve the guest through all of the phases of the booking, and what content do they need to serve that guest effectively? And when that guides us, then that determines, even from the very initial communication, of what our approach will be. So it's really important to have great communication with our partners.
Yeah, let's break it. Go ahead, Jake. I'm sorry.
No. I was just gonna, I love the way she says that it's to understand their guests, and I I'm gonna jump in a little bit and kind of answer the question a little bit from a PMS perspective. I think focusing on that guest, that's really because what SHR does and their aspect of the guest journey is different than the PMS, right? When that integration and when it happened, the guest is at the hotel. So these integrations allow the hotels themselves to really focus on that guest, right? So when you think about the front desk agent not having to spend time entering reservations, right? The CRS is taking that, or the CRM is making sure that we have all the data about that guest when they check in, or from our integration with iVvy, right? We think about the sales and catering solution and those event managers not having to do that stuff in the PMS, and they can focus on getting ready for the guest. So it really allows them to focus on what is most important, and that is their guest, I think. And without these integrations, they're spending time doing things that isn't making their guests happy.
Yeah, Amy, from your perspective, sales and catering, I'll be honest, isn't always thought of as one of the core technologies that needs implemented, to be able to walk the guest through the guest journey or serve data up throughout the guest journey. But I think it's as critical, if not more important, obviously on the group business side. So, what data does the sales and catering system need to share and need to pull from these other systems to make hoteliers' jobs easier?
So again, to Estella and Jake's points, it really depends on what system we're integrating with, and we try to look at each of the data points of iVvy and what would be necessary to share. But going back to that customer experience, without all of this manual work that's happening, so double duty on everything, which you're exactly right. It's amazing how many people's sales and catering solution is still sitting independently of everything else. So I think we're kind of the last piece of that puzzle to really be focusing on, where all that does is create additional work for the team to not be being able to get back to their customers quickly. I mean, the first or second to respond to a lead is usually the winner of the business. But if I've got all this manual work, I've got to go look in the PMS and see what we're selling online, and then go through all these different processes in order to put a proposal together and check availability and go over here, then how in the world am I going to get back to my customer the first or second? So that comes back to the customer experience. The more integrated you have with the systems, pulling that information into your sales and catering, which is really where the comfort level of this team is, right? This is their daily system, and they're not usually all that comfortable with all these other systems or want to go into all these other systems. That allows them to get back to the guest quickly with all the documentation that they have to provide out to their customer. So that's the importance of that customer experience. That's exactly why those integrations will provide so much value, especially in this space. Again, one that we're kind of lagging behind in this space as far as integrating our this specific piece of technology for the hospitality world into other systems.
I'm going to ask. Go ahead, Estelle.
I completely agree with Amy, and in addition to that, the fact that hotels have less staff right now, but the number of steps hasn't changed.
Right.
So, I mean, that can make such a difference in the number of deals that you can go after and the speed at which you can respond to them.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask each of you a sort of a follow-up to that question. And I'll start with you, Amy. You talked a lot about sort of the pre-arrival experience, right? Making, getting your rates and your group rates and availability out there, and bringing, handling, managing RFPs, responding to RFPs. But I know iVvy, quote unquote end-to-end platform, right? I know you do a lot of stuff once the guest is already on or arrives on property too, right? So talk a little bit about how integrations are critical there with the other, kind of bringing all the departments together once the guest is actually on property.
Yeah, so they're there, and again, it still is working within one system. So this is the system of everything, the property management system of the sales and catering department. And so without having, after that booking experience has happened, without having some of that information still filtering into iVvy, you're still having to look in multiple different systems. So for instance, I've got my customer, they want to know if such and such is in their block. Now they have to go look into the PMS to see if that person has booked within the block, or is that person checked in. Where if we can filter all that information so that as CS is kind of working with the customer, as they're going through and detailing out or checking rooms and such, having that all that information at their fingertips, so that when the meeting planner is asking, they have it all right there and they're not having to look into multiple different systems.
Yep. Estella, 2 questions for you. One on revenue management, it's sort of the pricing component to this, and then one on personalization. So, obviously we're seeing transient business come back quicker than group business, right? And I think, in talking with everybody on this call, sort of figuring out what rates we can charge for meetings and events as they sort of start to come back in Q4 2021 is critical, right? Like that, it's a very dynamic environment right now. So how does the sales and catering and the revenue management software need to speak so that we're spitting out the right rates, we're forecasting right, and we're determining the right rates for the right meeting space?
It is critical. The revenue management system has to consider groups, whether they're tentative or definite. The revenue management system can no longer use historical data. So it has to be both proactive and reactive, and that includes both definite and tentative groups.
Yeah, and then Amy, back to you on that. So there's a lot to be said about displacement, right? Are you guys calculating that for your customers?
So that's a perfect example of integration. So iVvy's never going to take on being the revenue optimization tool for the customer, right? We are the system of record for the process. But to that point, with an integration into revenue management, now we can provide data for revenue management to internalize, as Estella mentioned, with what is forward looking, what prospect and tentative business, what definite business is on the books. And Estella's right, history is almost a thing of the past, although we could go back, further than looking at last year. So there's lots of different things to be considered when quoting group business. And one of those things is the transient demand, especially when you don't have a property that is just, an enormous amount of rooms, where you have a constrained resource. Then now you're sharing that constrained resource for group business and for transient. And obviously we know transient is very strong right now, but as group starts to come back, it's going to have to consider what sort of displacement that is. And that's where that piece of the puzzle comes from revenue management. So us as a system, we're the system of record, and that's where it's really important to have those integrations so that we can provide that information back to the salesperson so that they're quoting the right rates.
Right.
Yep. Estella, on CRM, I think we're hearing a lot about, this sort of next wave of travelers really looking for experiences, really looking for, more than just a room, more than just a place to stay, but their hotel being part of their entire travel experience, and really, tailoring not only our offers, but our experiences for these guests, whether that be, making the hotel feel part of the local community, personalizing what kind of pillows they want, what they want in their minibar, those types of things. How is Maverick helping customers with that, and how critical are those integrations so that once the guest gets on property, those things can be put into action?
So the CRM is a very important component, of course, but it also has to be coupled with that booking experience, right? The booking experience is where buying decisions are made for those pricing decisions that you made. So it is where your revenue management strategy and the guest end up meeting together. So having a CRM like Maverick, or just a CRM in place to present the relevant offer to your customer, can allow you to have that booking experience be more dynamic. Take into consideration if it's a known or unknown guest. Take into consideration the path that they had to land into that booking. And so all of this means that precisely the topic that we were talking about earlier of those open APIs become important. So what we're saying, similar CRS, CRM, in some aspects, there's certain similarity from an add-on or service item perspective to what Jake was describing on the PMS. While we enable all of those through the booking experience, that user interface, while we enable all of that through knowing or recognizing the customer, there are other aspects that we're not going to cover. So we have integrations to other third-party systems where you can book items or book for time, et cetera, and we bring those as part of the offering and make those available to that booking experience. But it is important to have the combination of both, of the recognition of the profile or the path and a flexible booking experience, because that is where the buying decision is made.
And I think, Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but where I think the PMS comes in, and I could be mistaken, but where I think the PMS fits into all of this is, so all of the pricing decisions and the personalization decisions and the distribution decisions that iVvy and SHR and others are working on then needs translated once the guest comes on property, right? Once the guest checks in, you need to have all that data available so that you can put that into action. So talk a little bit about that. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then kind of a second part of that question, Jake, if you don't mind, is the idea of not only having that information on property, but having it above property. So maybe corporate can tap into that, or maybe, if you've got a portfolio of properties, this guest has checked into Salt Lake in the past and is checking into Orlando now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as you look at a CRM and a booking engine and all the things that happen prior to that guest arrival. All, you know, their guest booked, this is their rate, they want extra pillows in the room. They want, I don't know, cheese and wine on their pillow, whatever that would be. It doesn't do any good to give them that option if when they show up, that doesn't happen. So is it critical when these integrations happen that we get that information, and then not only that the PMS has it, that it's distributed to the right teams, whether that's through an integration to another partner or through our own solutions, right? We have mobile apps, things like that we're doing. We want to make sure maintenance knows, or housekeeping, or whoever is going to put those things in the room does that. Or when a guest checks in online that their room is dirty, right? For example, that they get told when the room actually gets marked as clean and that they can show up to the hotel, and that when that room is dirty, the housekeeper is notified that somebody's actually checked into this room, maybe you want to clean it first, right? So that experience and knowing those things about the guests and what they're doing in the PMS is irrelevant if we don't actually act on them. Then once the guest is gone, yes, the PMS isn't as involved, but you're right, that we, kind of what Estella was talking about early on, right? We need to understand that, right? Corporate needs to understand that. From a sales perspective, who should we be reaching out to? What group event or people or should we be reaching out to? What should our sales managers be doing? So understanding the guests that are coming in, what they spent money on, how much time they spent, why they were there, is critical, right? Again, whether that's through our solution, our enterprise solution, or using a CRM or some other like Maverick or some other, it's critical.
And then, Jake, another thing that we see is for serving that guest, like you said, that drives a lot of the decisions that we make, but then also for your operations, right? The fact that we provide the PMS the correct, you know, breakdown of resorts and fees, and the service items could have a different tax than the room tax, and all of the intricacies of actually performing the business that they intended to when they created all of this experience-driven attributes, but then you have to fulfill it. You have to execute on it. So passing that on to PMS so they can enable them to do that is also very important.
I think that it's funny. That's one of those things I think that now is expected. Maybe in the past it wasn't, and especially in the sales and catering world, you're right. That's still one of those components that you find is often not integrated. But how much more time are you able to focus on those events and your customers and those things when that stuff's just done and you know it's right? We got the information. I know what the blocks are. I know what the rate we've quoted for that group is. And when people start adding their pickups and doing their rooming lists, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to look in the sales and catering to do that. It's absolutely critical.
Well, and to your point with that too, is if we're not sharing the information from this piece of the puzzle, which when it's not integrated, then you really don't have the full value of that customer for per se the CRM, right? Yeah. Because you're missing a whole chunk of the business. That's a very important part of the business to many properties and to many organizations. And so if we're able to push that data into a CRM, so now you know that customer from the whole angle. Are they doing group business with us? Are they booking transient business with us? Do they have corporate negotiated rates? That's where we can pass that information into other systems, and you have what ultimately becomes the total customer value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has been an awesome conversation so far, guys. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about evaluating new technology and maybe give some takeaways for hoteliers who may be in this situation where they're looking to innovate or they're looking for cutting edge technology, what really they should look for and what questions they should ask their solutions providers. So maybe Amy, I'll stick with you and ask you, what are you seeing, as you're out there talking to prospects and to customers, what are you seeing as prompting a hotel company to evaluate looking at new technology today? Is it different than what was prompting them in 2019? And I guess the follow-up part B of that question is, how important is integrations in that decision-making process, and how should they be thinking about integrations as they evaluate new technology?
Yeah, I think that probably poor partnerships in the past with vendors who maybe weren't open to this whole piece of it. This integration is what's forcing people to really, and pushing on those vendors, those companies to, you handle it. The customer, our customers, our hotels, our hotel companies, they don't want to deal with this. They want to see that partner is taking that on themselves, and working with the others in the industry to make that happen. So poor partnership is forcing people to really evaluate what's happening. Cost of technology is something that people are really trying to fine tune right now. Obviously, we don't have massive amounts of budgets anymore. So getting the most cost effective, good technology that works for each individual property is really important. But those are two major things. And then the integrations part, absolutely, the openness to be able to share data into other systems and allow for them to not have to do some of this manual work, especially in this space, as we've mentioned, because it's been something that's been lacking in the past.
Yeah, Jake, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that Amy said is probably one of the most critical things. Who are those partners that you're working in, and who are the partners that they work with as far as integrations, and depending on what types of technology you're looking to replace. Are you looking to replace the PMS? Right, it's critical to know that your PMS can integrate to the solutions that you need it to integrate to. But when you're doing, it's not that we just integrate, but are we a good partner with that vendor? I think there was a question that came in, I'm kind of jumping and asking about, says, what can vendors do to take the customer out of the equation when there's vendors that are not getting along and the customer's stuck in the middle. And I think one of the things is making sure that those partners, vendors, SHR, iVvy, Quorum, have a good relationship. That is critical, right? I need to know, and we look at Quorum as our customers as partners, right? So our vendors and the people that we integrate with are an extension of us. So we want to make sure that we can serve our customers and not make any challenges for them, or so they don't have any challenges, so that when there's problems that arise, we work that out with the vendor and it's not their problem, right? We know they've got a business to run. We want to do that as easy as possible. So I think that is critical as they look at making changes. The other thing I would add really quickly is, in today's world too, what are there security risks that are involved? I don't want to dive into security too much, but it's one of those things like, what are you really, there's a lot of things that are going on in this world. And you see ransomware attacks, all kind of crazy things. Do you really need to make a change due to security, right? And our integrations today now, are they secure? And are they doing it in a way that's proper? And again, do you have that relationship? Do they have relationships with those partners that help you to know that if something goes wrong, that you're not going to have to deal with that kind of thing?
I completely agree. I think the word critical, I would re-emphasize.
Yeah.
It is critical. It is critical, not only for the interface part, but the support part.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't end the day you activate that integration. It continues on the service that we provide to our clients and to each other. Think of it this way. What I would tell hoteliers is, don't just look at what is being presented to you as this is the number of features,
Mm-hmm.
but then take that number of features and say, how many of these are integrated? How many of these will I be able to successfully use because these different vendors work as partners? So the number of features that I wish to adopt will speak to each other. If they do not integrate, if there is not this critical component of partnership, then it's a great feature, but it's going to cost you more to use it because you're going to have to do it manually, or you will give up on it because there is no integration. And that was one of the reasons that you chose it. So just those aspects I would invite hoteliers to consider.
That's a great point.
And I would just add to that this should be an expectation that the partners are talking together. And if development happens on either piece, that integration isn't going to be broken because they've formulated a plan of what will happen when development happens in either system that might impact the integration. We should be driven to be on the forefront of that, to be active instead of reactive to those things, and it absolutely should be an expectation of the customers, of our customers, of the hoteliers. Yeah.
Yep.
Great questions and great comments coming in the chat box and in the Q&A. Michelle, I want to let you know, our listeners, one of our listeners, that we did see your comments. She says that she's found in one job that she was doing the same thing 3 or 4 times in each system because each system needed manual input that caused a lot of wasted time on her end. We know, we're aware of it. And your other comment about group blocks in the PMS, Amy is going to take a look at that for you. And then, sort of the last question that came in was a perfect tee up for the last question I wanted to ask. So I'll set this up and kind of this will be our last question before we round up. And, the way I positioned it was a little bit different than the way our listener positioned it, but I think we're getting at the same thing. I positioned it as, what innovation do you think the industry is lacking today? And our listener asks, what tech trends do you see on the horizon? And I think those are one and of the same, right? So what, if you guys can put on your sort of 30,000 foot thinking caps a little bit, what are we missing? Where is the industry going? Where do you see something like an innovation that'll kind of revolutionize the industry over the next 2 or 3 years? I know a difficult question, but I'm hoping you guys might be able to take a stab at it.
Yeah.
And I'll open it up for whoever on this one.
Well, from our side, sorry, Jake. From an SHR side, something that we're looking in the short and long horizon is automation across platforms. So when something happens in one system, for it to create an action in a different system. We're approaching it, again, in the short horizon, because the number of steps that it takes to connect to a channel, for example, or distribute a decision takes many, many steps, and we're automating some of that. But moving forward, this will continue. The need for automation of manual steps that we do today that start with integration, but then create cross-platform connectivity and actions, if there's then that type of workflows, is where we see things going. And again, open APIs is a great concept. Collaborative partners is a great concept as well. But I think all of us will strive to, how do we make this into workflows or business sense that we figure out as vendors, and then bring those as full solutions across different platforms.
I'll jump in there and kind of just add to that, Estella, because that's exactly my thoughts, is automation. And I think that as an industry, as the hospitality technology industry, we are lacking behind a lot of other industries in the technology space for this specific piece in automation. So how do we create processes that are better automated, to not knowing that we might not have the number of people, at least in the immediate sense. And at iVvy, we definitely have been working on those things, automating the booking process, so that, a customer could actually book a meeting or a group block through the customer's website. And with that piece, being able to automate the information to the customer, and then have them then share that information back through to their sales and catering. So I would just echo exactly what you said, especially in our space, which there has been very, very little automation in the past.
Yeah, and I'd add, I guess, as I talked about, one of the things that in a post-COVID world is we need to be more innovative. And not that it's just new technology, but that we need to be better, right? We need to do things faster, higher quality, less expensive. And there are lots of great things out in the hospitality tech space. But where we are lacking, I think, is making those things integrated so that it is faster, it is less expensive, and it is, you know, higher quality for all of the hoteliers out there. How do we make these systems talk through a platform, and that ultimately leads to a great guest experience, right? So integrated guest applications and the way the guest interacts and what the guest is doing is going to continue to grow, I believe, and making sure all of these systems talk together better. Not that they're not today, but how do we do it better than we do today so that that is a better experience ultimately for the guests and then for our hotels.
Jake, to add to that, and more cost effective as well. So
Yeah.
integrations have always been, you know, extremely expensive for our partners, for the hoteliers. And I think, you know, we all need to take it on and look to each other to ensure that that isn't something that's going to hold people back from these integrations because it's so costly for them. You know, so a lot of times they're there, but people are just not adapting to it. And
Right.
so, you know, we all need to look at that model of how we're charging customers for those integrations.
Team, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this call. I found it very informative and very collaborative, and I think we shared some great messages for our hoteliers. I hope you out there listening and tuning in were able to take some takeaways from this, and, you know, hopefully implement some processes and some strategies into your business to be able to position yourself to capitalize on the recovery. That's what we're all hoping for here, is that our industry returns to where it once was. And we're able to all do the fun things and present awesome experiences to our guests that we were able to prior to COVID. So I want to thank you guys very much for taking the time to share your insight with us. And with that, we'll wrap.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Jason. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.